us?
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hi, okay. I think with the interest of time, because we've only got 90 minutes, I think we will kickstart now that Mark's with me. Just to remind everybody, the purpose of this particular meeting is to obviously engage the industry, especially the incentive participants, on any suggestions that they'd like to make in terms of the incentive review process. So, and how we'd like to do that is to obviously get your feedback with regards to your concerns and areas of improvement as well with regards to the incentive program. But before we get into that, just a few highlights and a few developments since we all last met with the DTIC on the 19th of April. We've had several conversations with the DTIC around the incentive review process. I think we were definitely reassured as industry that the incentive will continue and that the review process is definitely well underway. And I can confirm that because we have been invited to be part of the steering committee to activate that, and the first meeting is actually was supposed to be yesterday, but it was postponed to this coming Friday. So we know that there's definitely an incentive review happening. And this is our opportunity, and the reason our opportunity to actually aggregate all of our comments into a proposal that we present to the DTIC next Thursday. So Mark has been invited as part of the PMO in the presidency, trying to support us from a sector perspective to obviously coordinate all of the information and all of the inputs and present it in a proper proposal format, which gets submitted to them, and then obviously we would have them consider that as part of the review process. Also, to let you know that once the process kickstarts and they do their research work, there will be another stakeholder engagement which they will host, where you will be able to have a view of what's being proposed and be able to make comments in terms of the draft revised incentive program. So there will be other opportunities for engagement as well. But this session is going to be a very interactive one. We are really looking forward to a lot of support, inputs, etc. from all of you on the call. The second thing that has happened is that the minister was able to visit one of our operators in the Western Cape on Friday. And I actually joined him at that meeting. And I had an opportunity to obviously highlight some of the concerns of that the industry had with regards to the incentives, the discussions that was had with Dimakatso, and I can assure you that Minister completely understands the importance of the incentive, the importance of South Africa remaining competitive, so there was absolute support from that perspective. The only major concern that he has is that he wants a proper size of the industry as we speak in terms of headcount, and he wants us to respond to that request with a matter of urgency. So just to let everyone on the call know that we will be sending out, for those that are not based in the Western Cape, But for other regions, which is KZN, Gauteng, and the Eastern Cape, we will be sending out an affidavit to have you confirm your headcount numbers, so that we can share with Minister. And I think you must give us your headcount numbers as at the end of April, so that we can share that with Minister this coming Friday. Minister has requested an executive oversight committee meeting on Friday afternoon at 2 p.m. And I will, as soon as I'm done with this call, I will be sending out an invite to all of the CEOs to please attend that meeting on Friday. We do apologize for the short notice, but I'm sure you would understand the importance of being part of that engagement with the minister. And we also hoping that if everybody cooperates and sends us back those affidavits as quickly as possible, we'll be able to give him some level of comfort and reassurance on Friday with regards to the head count. The reason I've excluded the Western Cape is because the Western Cape has already done this task through Cape BPO. And those affidavits, in fact, we are adopting KPPO's methodology in terms of how they sourced the information. And we are going to submit the numbers that they've shared with us on Friday, to the DTIC as the Western Cape numbers. So just to give you an idea, the number was sitting at just over 63,000 from a headcount perspective for the Western Cape. The only requirement, and Clayton is going to reach out to the BPOs in the Western Cape to ask for permission to obviously share that report directly with the DTIC, obviously not with BPESA, but directly with the DTIC. So it is going to be used specifically for the purposes of understanding the impact of the incentives on the growth of the industry, and also to be able to give them a sense of comfort around the sustainability of jobs that's been incentivized over the time. I mean, the incentives have been in place now for about 17 years. So, how impactful has it been? What were we able to sustain the jobs over the long term, etc. So it's extremely critical that we all support and we comply. And for those here that are incentive administrators and not necessarily the CEOs themselves, please can you all share this information with your CEOs or your MDs, and please get them to support with signing those affidavits. And if they're not available, then obviously the next in charge can actually sign that so that we can submit it to the DTIC. So this is a very important task, I think, before we start any with any other work. So the other thing that we are going to be doing during the course of this session is we'll be running a few polls just to try and get a sense of statistics, from the audience. So if you can please respond to those polls so that we have at least some kind of indication to support us, as we wait for the outcomes and the results of this exercise that we'll be conducting. So please do support those polls. They'll be coming onto the screen shortly as we proceed. The other thing that we have done to be able to support the work that we do as an industry association, as knowledge partners like Genesis, etc., is to be able to monitor progress in terms of the memorandum of agreement that's been signed between the DTIC and BPESA and Harambee. And what Genesis is going to do is that they're going to do a summary as well in terms of what's been achieved to date. And we are going to then, share that with the DTIC together with, like I said, the headcount numbers to be able to support our propositions with regards to the incentives. I will just pause before we get into the actual session to see if there are any questions on any of the things that I've announced thus far. Remember, two big events for this week that we need your support on is submitting the affidavits in terms of your headcount. And the second one is the Executive Oversight Committee meeting with the Minister on Friday afternoon at 2 p.m. So I really would appreciate, especially the CEOs. It's only going to be the CEOs that get invited to it. So please do avail yourselves and please do attend that session. It will be extremely important for you so that he can engage with you all directly and ask questions that he has with regards to the growth of the industry, challenges, etc. So, yeah, are there any questions? Any hands? I don't see any. Okay, so Mark, over to you in terms of how you would like to facilitate the actual inputs with regards to the incentives.
Thanks, Reshni. Good afternoon, everyone. Maybe just to contextualize my involvement in this process, I am from Genesis. Some of you will recall we helped with the GBS master plan a few years back. But currently I'm supporting a process within BPESA, which is a partnership between business and government on short-term interventions that can support youth unemployment. And amongst all of the sectors that are delivering new job creation opportunities, for young people across the economy, GBS is a real standout. So it's one of the focus areas for the incentive. And we're just supporting the process, working with BPESA to manage, what both business and government need to be putting into the sector to unlock those job creation opportunities. Next week, we have an opportunity to brief the DG of DTIC on, what we've put down as the priority investment and policy interventions that both business and government need to invest in to unlock the growth potential of the sector. And we'd really like to use the input from today, from all of you to inform that discussion. Reshni, my understanding is that you'll be facilitating this session with your members. But just to say that I think we're particularly interested in getting operators' inputs on what has worked and what hasn't worked in the current GBS incentive program. What would industry be requiring in terms of the incentive redesign process to support continued growth and inclusive job creation in the sector. And I think in particular, an area that we're really interested in terms of the initiative that we're running in BPESA is extending job creation in the sector into townships and tier 2 delivery locations. So I think we'd be, particularly interested to hear from the operators here today, the extent to which incentives would support you in that process, and what you would need from incentives to support that. So thanks, Reshni. That's just a little bit of context around my involvement. But I'll hand back to facilitate, Reshni.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mark. Thanks for that. I think the first poll is on the screen at the moment. On a scale of 1 to 10, how important are incentives to shift your delivery operations to townships or tier 2 locations? So please select your choices there.
Where do I can't see anything. Rashmi, other than you.
Oh, are you not unable to see the poll? I think you must look at the within the chat. Trace, is it on the chat?
It's been launched for everyone, so it should have popped up. Is there anyone else that can't see it? If you can just raise your hand.
Is it by mistake?
You closed it by mistake. I'll end the poll and relaunch it.
Okay, great. So she's relaunching that. If you can please respond to it. So I think the best way to deal with the inputs with regards to the incentives is to look at it in terms of using the structure of the existing incentive and look at firstly the eligibility criteria on the existing incentive. Does that align with your business structure in terms of eligibility? I mean, is the industry struggling to meet eligibility? And when we talk eligibility, we're talking about the number of jobs, the minimum of a 3-year contract, the triple BEE compliance, etc. So all of those things, do those meet? Are there any concerns around the eligibility criteria of the incentive? And we can just take some comments around that and record it. So any hands with regards to eligibility? Is everybody comfortable? Is everybody happy? Devin, go ahead.
I guess the question from my side is just around the BE contributor status and how the eligibility is defined, because I know that's been a kind of historical debate, and I'm not sure where it's gonna land. But from my point of view, the challenge we have is, as a domestic BPO going into international markets, we comply with the domestic regulations and obviously have to maximize that at considerable cost to ourselves. We then compete in markets with our peers here, in terms of doing business development offshore, etc. And many of even our South Africans choose to focus on the international markets. So domestic compliance is less of a cost factor to them. So I'm not sure how the incentives are going to look at that for companies that are in that kind of predicament. Where do we put our funding towards pivoting to international markets and less focus on domestic compliance, let's call it? For me, that's a bit of a conundrum that's not really addressed in the current structure of the incentives. And I'm well aware we don't want to compromise job creation, but somewhere in that mix, there has to be some kind of recognition of the additional costs domestically owned BPOs and operators incur.
I get you. Thanks, Devin. So it's additional costs for compliance. Okay, that's perfect. And then Trevor, I see your hands.
Yeah, Resh. The question around the eligibility criteria, the minimum of a 3-year contract. So I just worry about that, because most of your mature clients tend to go with a minimum 1 year and a rolling contract, etc. So it doesn't specify a 3-year contract. Now, you could have a 5-year contract and it can be canceled for whatever reason within a space of 3 months via termination of convenience. So my question is just around the minimum 3-year contract and the rationale behind that, because I understand what the government is saying, but whether you got a 5-year contract, you can still lose a contract within 3 months. So I'm just, questioning that point.
I promised myself that I'm not going to respond to these questions because that's not my job today. I'm here to just facilitate your responses and your inputs to give to the DTIC. Trevor, we will pass this on. So the rationale basically for a minimum of 3-year contracts, that's perfect. And then Roland, I saw your
Yeah.
hand and now you disappeared.
Yes, it was actually very much on Trevor's question there, and that is,
Oh,
if you look at domestic operators wanting to enter the international market, to secure a 3-year, 5-year contract is very difficult off the bat. So you typically would get a 1 year with a renewal. So I think there should be a level of differentiation in terms of foreign investors coming in, which we welcome with open hands for sure, but also locally in terms of local operators and local entrepreneurs. We need to also look at how to accelerate that that presence in South Africa. And one of these things could be the eligibility issue that could be an obstacle. So I would propose at least 1 year.
okay. It's very hard for me to hold back on the rationale there, but
We can see that in
I'm
your
not going to.
face. We can see that in your face. Hold it, Resh.
It's because I felt so passionate about having that that criteria in the incentive. Remember, the incentive program, for those of you who don't know it as well, is actually a 5-year incentive program. So government is actually committing monies to your growth over a 5-year period. So obviously some level of commitment would be required. And if everybody recalls, this used to be, it's still seen as a footloose kind of industry. So you want to give comfort to say that, listen, it's not, because there is a commitment, there's a longer term commitment, and at least, they weren't asking for 5 years, and it was 3 years. But nonetheless, we will take these comments. Hitesh, over to you.
All right, thanks, Rashni. Rashni, my
Awesome.
point is pertaining to the five. Sorry, Sid.
No, go ahead, Hitesh.
You want to go?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Hitesh, we're waiting for you. I hope you're not on mute.
So, Rashni, my point for ideas. Now, typically, let's see, come into that campaign. It's just for that 1 year. So any new ramps or any growth that we see in that new campaign does not necessarily get covered. And maybe, if we could look at exploring 5 years for a campaign that is won. So let's say during the 5-year duration, if we've won business in the 4th year, the incentive scheme should look at covering that particular campaign for the full 5 years, rather than just looking at a cutoff for the organization at the end of the 5th year. I don't know if I confused you, Rashni.
No, I understand. You basically saying that it shouldn't cover jobs over 5 years, but it should cover campaigns over 5 years.
Correct.
Okay.
Sid had a question. Joined, as in we've joined together. So I think he had a question. Sid, do you want to go next?
Yeah. So I think, Rashni, to your question around the criteria, I think this year we have seen some bit of unwarranted requests, like whether it's IBM's log, last 10 years data. So I think whatever are the qualification or the eligibility yardstick, I think it can be adhered to, but it is not something that should change if the budgeting goes wrong. So I have a feeling that there's effort being made to punch holes to reduce that demand. So that's my first one. Second, to your last poll question, that will this investment help us move to a tier 2, tier 3 city? I think, in my honest opinion, that's maybe secondary or tertiary. To maintain the level of service that large players are signing up for with their clients, just to sustain those services, you need the grants. Forget about tier 1 and tier 2. They will come with their own challenges. The point is today, and I think I did mention it in the last call as well, the price point in South Africa is increasing. It unfortunately doesn't have that price advantage it maybe used to have 4 or 5 years back. Second, looking at the maturity curve of this geo, there are a lot of investments that are needed in terms of enhancing or upskilling the domain and the leadership competence. And there's a lot of money which is needed to do that. And I did speak about the transport piece as well. So I think it's a combination, right? So somewhere to make those investments and maintain bare minimum profitability level, these investments are needed. Now, if those investments or if the grants continue, then if any organization wants to move to tier 2 or tier 3 city, I think automatically it will in a way help, because your profit profile or margin profile will improve, because I would like to believe that in tier 2 or tier 3 city, your real estate cost, your people cost will be slightly lower than a location like a Cape Town or a Durban or a Joburg, right? So just wanted to share these two perspectives, Rashni.
Great, thank you. Thanks for that. So that's valuable inputs. Any other? Oh, Sean, I see you. Yeah, please go ahead.
Hi, Rashni. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you perfectly. And before you start, apologies for not being able to take your call. Please go ahead.
No worries. Thank you. I think totally share the sentiments that have just been shared now on the topic of especially your tier 2 and 3 cities, and when one looks at that is if we're going to try and lower the barrier to enter and encourage, I think, BPO providers to become braver in that space, which is an exciting space, is I think it's not just about people and incentive. There's certainly infrastructure and connectivity, which is a key piece. Well, my principal point I just wanted to highlight is when one talks about inclusive hiring or of the exclusive groups that we're targeting, it certainly resonates with the master plan, and it certainly has a place. I think what we have, and I did mention this in our session that we had with the DTI collectively, is when we are looking at international clients, and they sometimes have quite specific criteria that they're actually looking for individuals with 6 months experience. They are looking for individuals that bring a certain level of customer experience from day one. And then if we now apply the definition of inclusive hire, unfortunately, that wouldn't for every campaign hit the mark. So I think in terms of qualifications, and if there is a scheme that's going to bring that more to the front of actually a qualifying criteria, there could be quite a risk there in terms of diluting the benefit of the plan, because you're then going to drive the master plan, hire people to train them and upskill them from an excluded environment, but then you're going to have problems with your client on the other side that wanted skilled individuals. And I'm not talking about everyone, but I certainly think the market we're going after, it's not as easy to go from street to seat. Thanks.
Thanks, Sean. We hear you. Like I said, it's taking everything in me to just hold back in my responses, which I wouldn't do, but great inputs, and we capturing all of it.
But Rashni, I think it's a really good debate, because there are other incentives that touch our ecosystems for all of us as providers. And when you think of the excluded inclusive hire, definition, and that group of individuals, the core value there is first of all skills development. How do we equip those individuals to be work ready before they even have to hit an Amazon campaign? And so it's almost as if that inclusive hire pocket very much sits in a skills development, job creation environment, where this scheme it needs to talk to the level of clients and market that we're trying to attract. So good
Great.
debate.
It's a very good debate, and just remember that what is an incentive? An incentive is to encourage you to do something you wouldn't ordinarily do. So government is not going to incentivize something that you would ordinarily do in the ordinary course of business. They want to encourage you to do different things. So just bear that in mind. Because we are speaking about an incentive review. But Mark, I see you, so please do go ahead.
Thanks, Roshni. I just wanted to flag, although I think the main topic of discussion today is inputs on the DTIC's OPEX incentive program, to Sean and Siddharth's point, shifting into tier 2 delivery locations, for example, means we need improvements in infrastructure, transport, work readiness skilling. And I think some of the other asks we can perhaps make to the DTIC, in addition to continuing their fiscal incentives, is for their kind of championship and support in getting other government and other stakeholders to play the role that they need to play. So whether that's local governments or provincial governments, or indeed working with the SETAs to find out how we can reallocate, skills funding for work readiness training. So just to make that point, I think, and to encourage others, to please share your viewpoints around what other forms of support you would need to shift into those other delivery locations or increase inclusive hiring, because I think that's something that we can enable with DTIC as well. Thanks.
Absolutely, Mark, and that's a very valid point, because the one thing that we all must remember is that we all signed that master plan collectively. We were part of the engagements prior to the master plan being developed. We made inputs into the master plan process. We made commitments as industry, and now it's time to deliver on those commitments. And I think creating an enabling environment and an ecosystem to be able to support is of the utmost importance. So yes, definitely, Mark, I think that's very important. And it's good to also hear from others, on their views around, the tier 2 and tier 3 sort of strategies, and, their support for it, and what would incentivize or motivate them to move into those locations as well. So if there are any other comments, and if you don't want to raise your hand and air your views here, then just please pop your comments in the chat as well, because we'd really appreciate it. And I mean, this is our best opportunity to be able to contribute to this process. And how, as I usually say, speak now or forever hold your peace. So please do participate. Otherwise, you're going to have to accept whatever it is that's given to you, right? Roland, over to you.
Okay, on your question, I think, what could work is a two-tier system where if it's the main cities, there's X amount of incentives, and the second and third tier cities is a higher incentive, because there has to be a motivation for people wanting to go and open up there, and all those socioeconomic development challenge that we're trying to deal with. But at the end of the day, we're dealing with entrepreneurs who needs to make a certain margin and profit. And if I were to design a system, I would just increase the incentive.
I
No.
agree to Roland, Reshni, because today EXL as an organization ventured into a tier 2 city by the name of George. While there are a lot of advantages that we experienced because we had an early mover advantage there, we do not have too much of competition there, but because of being an early mover, of course, there was a significant amount of investment that was needed to ensure people are, at least they reach to a level of being trainable. So the amount of incentive in an ideal scenario should definitely be higher than what you are getting, because there's a bit of incentive, or primarily then the current scheme is generally used to sustain your business. And if you have to make additional investment, there has to be a sort of a premium over and above the existing grants to nullify the costs for the CBA to stack up. I think that's something that should be definitely explored.
Brilliant. Thank you. That's very valuable. Let's move. Roland, is that a new hand? Okay, thank you. So moving on, because I don't see any other hands, and we literally have less than an hour left, so 50 minutes. I don't think, I mean, unless there are comments around the non-eligibility criteria, which basically says displacement of jobs from A to B wouldn't qualify for the incentives. And obviously, if you're getting other incentives from the DTIC, you know, I mean, other incentives from government, you cannot access this incentive for the same work. So I think that, I don't think, are there any comments around that? I shouldn't just assume. Okay, I don't see any hands, so we'll move on to the evaluation criteria. So are there any comments with regards to the evaluation criteria? Sorry, there is a poll coming up on your screens, and it wants to know number of years you have received the DTIC incentives, and that question is obviously for operators only or incentive recipients only. So please can you respond to that? Just to remind you all on the eligibility criteria, obviously they look at the credibility of the company. They look at the scale, the credentials and the scale of operations in South Africa, and they look at the soundness of the application under review. And that's the part of the evaluation where you are required to score 60% for you to make it through to the adjudication committee. Is there anybody that has any concerns or challenges around the current evaluation criteria that the DTIC uses when they assessing your applications? I do not see any hands, so I assume that everybody is comfortable with that. So we will move on to the actual incentive processes, which is the, oh, I see, Sid. Sid, go ahead.
I know it might sound very selfish, but I think unless there's already a difference, I think there's a difference in grants basis the complexity level. But there should potentially be a difference in the grants if you're servicing an international client versus a domestic client. I don't know if it's there already, so pardon my ignorance on that.
The incentive is only for offshore clients, Siddharth. It's only for international. So local clients do not get the incentives. No. Okay. Great. So moving on to the processes, and this would be the application approval processes and then the claim processes in terms of the disbursement of the grant. So are there any concerns? Let's take the approval process first. Are there any issues and concerns around that? And here you could possibly highlight, I don't know, turnaround times, in terms of getting approval notices, you know, the frequency of adjudication committee meetings. We know that they meet once a month. Yeah, are there any concerns about that process, the support that the DTIC gives you in terms of making sure that you are compliant? Sid, I see your hand. Is that an old hand or a new one?
My hand is the same, but yeah.
Okay. Any inputs with regards to the approval, Sean? Please go ahead.
I think it's. I guess my comment is probably arches over the application and then the quarterly submissions. Is as much as I feel for the team as humans, there is a massive demand coming in, new applicants coming in, but yet the team itself is not increasing in capacity. So I think we are going to have problems with turnaround times. We're going to have frustrations if we don't look at some kind of either an automated process or I think the annual application is what it is. It has a deadline that's clearly defined, but the quarterly submissions, whether that could be half yearly, whether there is a different way of looking at that, that just clearly there is no increase in capacity for this demand of all of us partners. So there's got to be a pivot in either reducing the volume or bringing systems into play better.
Brilliant, and possibly more automated processes, automated systems as well. No, thanks for that, Sean. I have to share with you all the reason why we had to, at some point when we first introduced the incentive, we used to pay out at 6 months, and then at the end of the first year, end of the second year, end of the third year. And we were actually then accused of fiscal dumping, because everybody would put claims in March when it's the end of the financial year and expect to be paid then. And obviously from a government perspective, that is not proper financial management. And so we had to solve for fiscal dumping, Sean. So that's when we went on with the quarterly claims so that we could spread our cash flow and expenditure over the year. So it's quite interesting. But there's always reasons as to why things are done in the background. But this one, I felt like I have to explain to you guys. Being a government official is not easy, because when you're trying to solve one problem and give industry less admin, but then, like I said, it's very poor financial management as an official.
Yeah, which the context really is useful. And I mean, again, as humans, I think the team must be immensely under pressure. I think just the knock-on effect is impacting cash flow on organizations that's main expense is employee salaries. So I think it's almost appreciating the one side to solve for the other side.
Yeah, no, definitely. And Mark, I see your comment as well about automating the process. And I think that's becoming extremely important, because if the process was automated, then we'll never have the challenges that we have around the job numbers and the credibility of the numbers that industry is sharing with the minister, etc., because at least all of that will be captured, and then there's a lot of pressure being put on the industry association to speak about campaigns, etc. And obviously from a confidentiality perspective, industry is not going to easily share their campaign list with an industry association, but DTIC has to have that information for purposes of approving your application. So if it's automated, it would be so easy to be able to track, when do those campaigns come on, etc. So it is something, Mark, that we are proposing to the DTIC through our engagements with them over this week and next week, is to say, can we find a process in which we automate and make this a lot easier? And Sean, to your point, it will also assist in terms of faster and more efficient administration of the claims, and there wouldn't be so much of manual effort involved in actually physically going and checking all of the payrolls and everything else that you'll submit to validate your claims. So that's a great suggestion. And then so still under the processes, we've spoken about the application and we've spoken a bit about the claim. Is there any other issues around that? I mean, I know that there was lots of comments that was shared on the 19th around the frequency of payments, the issue around budget constraints, and the uncertainty around whether or not industry is going to get paid because of the budget limitations. Nobody seems to be speaking about it now, so are you no longer worried about that? Is that not a concern, or are you still keen to encourage them to be more transparent and plan better in terms of making sure that they can deliver on their commitments when due. No comments. Okay, that's
No,
great.
I think it's I'm making sure other people speak, but I think we'd be amiss if we go past this topic without commenting. Is the certainty in our business's income statement and cash flow and the consistency is key. And if that comes through better processes, more transparency from the DTI, frequent check-ins, I think those things will certainly help. We have to find a way that the incentive is seen as a once approved a guarantee, but the sentiment right now on the ground is it really? And that has massive implications on performance of all of our businesses. So certainty is a critical piece. And I think that unfortunately the confidence in that certainty at the moment is there's a bit of a doubt.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks so much, Sean, for highlighting that. So at least, we can make sure that it is captured. Just please remember that if you do not raise issues, we're not going to be putting it into that submission, and then we're going to be accused of not highlighting it when we had the opportunity to do so. So please be more participative, and please do add and cover those things which, even if we've passed those sections, there's nothing stopping you from, quickly raising your hands and alerting us to it. Hitesh, please go ahead.
Sure. Thanks, Rashmi. Rashmi, I think second what Sean said, certainty is important. Two potential opportunities. One, the current applications that have been submitted, obviously we're still waiting on whether those will be approved and whether there'll be any form of capping. And I think DTL only will confirm that after they have their own internal reviews. So it's a matter of wait and watch now. That's number one. Number two is this I picked up in conversations with DTI in the past as well. Let's say we're winning new logos. There is no provision as such to get a pre-approved budget, right? So every time we win a logo, we need to submit that again for review, and it's depending on budget availability whether we can proceed or whether it could be denied. So completely in alignment with Sean, that does pose a risk because we do making reference.
No, thanks, Hitesh. And Mark, just for your benefit in terms of capturing it, I think this issue of the capping needs to definitely be highlighted. But the good news that I have for all of you is that I had the opportunity to engage with the adjudication committee, and they have given me the assurance that they are not recommending any capping, because they understand that for this particular sector, it's a volume-based sector. And if you cap, then you are capping growth, which we can't afford to because we've got a very aggressive master plan. So they've definitely given us assurance that the capping, I think it was just a ad hoc kind of situation that they was trying to manage, but it will not happen, and it will not be introduced in the incentive review. So that's good news, but I think we have to highlight it to say that, that it has to be there so that they know that industry feels that capping is going to restrict their growth. Okay, that's great. So any other comments on those processes, application and claim processes? If not, I'm going to move on to the actual incentive values. And normally, the way this is done is through a global benchmarking exercise that takes place. They look at the fully loaded cost of operations in South Africa, and they compare that to our key competitor locations, and then they come up with a historically it used to be between 8 and 12% of OPEX in terms of value, and that's how the actual incentive value per job would be determined. So they would obviously use a similar methodology this time round. However, the challenge that I foresee with this process is that because of the kind of turnover we've had of staff within the sector, the poaching and the escalation in salaries, you know, where some operators have paid up to, I don't know, 60%, 80% more. It has put pressure on our fully loaded cost, and it ends up, you know, where we start becoming outpriced in terms of our global market. And what's going to happen is that we can't expect or rely on government to bridge that gap, because they already have a very constrained budget. So to be honest, that is something that, you know, is going to be challenging, and we don't know what that's going to look like. But yeah, I'm just providing some of my insights from, you know, how things happened historically. But if there are any comments, concerns, inputs into the actual incentive value, incentive amounts, and here you can also cover, for example, the categories, because, you know, there's non-complex, complex, and highly complex jobs. So yeah, if there's any inputs here or any considerations that you would like them to take into account, please do speak up now. There's another poll that's been run that speaks to the incentive impact, and what has the impact of the incentives been on your business growth. So if the incentive is extremely impactful, then you would go for a 10, and if it's least impactful, then you'll go for a 1. And I think the important thing around here is we're trying to figure out, you know, just how important the incentives are. If they were taken away, what would that do to your businesses? So please do respond on your screens, and please do respond to my question as well in terms of your inputs with regards to the value of the incentives, etc., and the categories of incentives as well. Wow, it seems like this industry is a very happy industry. I mean, you're very satisfied with the incentives that you receive. You have no complaints. That's wonderful.
I think the only steer I would probably give is the topic was mentioned earlier, is that attracting the right talent and having key talent born from within in South African talent for management. That will most likely be in your complex, or, you know, that category. And it's almost as, should there be a higher weighting on that as an incentive to make sure that we train and upskill and make sure we've got management within the South African pool as a first priority. And also probably we're going to have quite competitive salaries to compete for that talent. So that higher complex bracket, I would encourage a rationale that just looks at having a bit of a higher weighting on that increase. I think the lower non-complex is unfortunately transactional, and you've explained the dynamic there. But I think for our management and that skill level, because I think on the one side is, imagine we live in a world where this market grows and we end up exporting management from overseas into South Africa instead of grooming talent and management from within. So it's almost the center should try and encourage that.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sean. Roland, go ahead.
Yeah, on that comment, I do agree with Sean. I think there should be a happy mix between international expertise and local, expertise. But I do think there is a challenge around the team leader area, and there's some good thinking needing to go into bridging that gap and putting some solid money into that area of training. I've got a few other ideas. I don't know if that's we can speak about that now, or are you coming to that?
I'm coming to that. I was just trying to go through the structure of the incentive so that we organized in terms of how we make our inputs. I didn't want us to be all over the place.
Sure,
So this gives it a little bit of structure.
Yeah.
And Sean, I'm glad that you raised the leadership challenges, because I mean, the one thing that used to be a mantra at the DTIC is that the incentive can't solve all of the problems. However, it is definitely a massive concern. And when we speak about overheating, these are the things, the issues around skills, the issues around leadership, etc., becomes extremely critical. And where the need for that ecosystem approach and value chain to be able to support, it becomes extremely critical. And to Mark's point, everything doesn't need to be about money either. But I think government's support in terms of understanding the challenges and being able to support us in directing, for example, skills funding or channeling skills funding through the NSF into our sector would be extremely critical for us to be able to develop and grow that talent within the industry. So those comments are very key to the work that we want to do. And then I think that covers, the key sort of topics around the incentive guidelines. There's a part that covers performance monitoring and evaluation, which I do not want to miss the opportunity to get the industry to give inputs into this. And this is extremely key. It's extremely critical that, the one thing I do know, but I mean, even in the private sector, I mean, if you want to get a loan from a bank, you've got to provide them with a lot of supporting documents, numbers, everything has to be able to support, an application process for you to even be approved in the first place. So similarly with government, when there's incentives being requested, and when you approve for incentives, you have to, I mean, there's a responsibility on you to be able to report progress in an accurate way, and in a responsible way to the DTIC. So that is just absolutely important. So I know, and I think it's important for us to speak about, are there any concerns or challenges around the reporting process at the moment? I mean, if I ask this question to the DTIC, if they were on the call, they would give us, a few pages long in terms of challenges that they have, because there's always inconsistency, and it depends, is the HR person filling in this form, or is it the finance person? And each quarter there's different information, and which is why the minister, I think, is sitting with so much frustration at the moment. So are there any comments or concerns or inputs into this monitoring and evaluation process from the floor? I'm not seeing any hands, but from a BPESA perspective, we're definitely going to be putting in some inputs into this, because we want to make sure that we do not get into the kind of challenge we have at the moment, where, the minister, the DG, everybody is saying, listen, we don't believe the industry. They can't be growing because they aren't able to prove it. They aren't able to give us the numbers, etc. And remember, the only thing that they are seeing is the current incentive program that you are on and the jobs that you're reporting based on that particular incentive, and possibly a bit of the previous incentive that's on the tail end of their 5-year period, which gives them like a figure of about 33,000 odd jobs. So Minister thinks that is the number, or that is the head count within the industry. And we're saying to him, no, it's more like 100,000, because, if the Western Cape itself has 63,000, and hypothetically KZN has 30,000 and Gauteng has 10, that in itself gives you just over 100,000 jobs. But because we are so sensitive about reporting and not wanting to do it, etc., it is creating a challenge. So we're going to be setting up a steerco between, and here's another poll in terms of head count. And I'd really, really appreciate if you all can respond to this poll, just so that we can get a sense of the responses with those that have joined the call today, that would also be able to give a level of comfort to the principals at the DTIC. But I think, yeah, so I was saying we're setting up a steering committee to manage the jobs counting process, and that will be made up of the DTIC. It will be made up of BPESA officials, Cape BPO, our knowledge partner, Genesis, as well as Harambee, to ensure that, we can come up with a fair process, and a process which, would be accepted and adopted by industry, and they would be willing to contribute to those numbers on a more regular basis. So that's something that we will build in here, and we will commit on behalf of industry that it's something that we'll constantly provide, so that it validates the DTIC's spending, budgets, reviews of the incentive, etc. I think there is definitely an onus on us to be able to deliver and to be able to do that. So that's the last part of the actual guidelines. So now, Roland, I will open it up for any other. Oh, sorry, Paul, are you?
Yeah, I was going to say, isn't the simple? Oh, let me turn my camera on. Isn't it as simple as if the reporting is simpler, you do more regular reporting, so the whole thing is digitized from submission to claim to reporting. Every single BPO player on this call is doing monthly payroll. They'll be paying people on a monthly basis, so you know exactly who's where, when, etc. But the complexity of the submission makes it a challenge in itself. So if you simplify, so there's an approval amount, and then you simplify submission, simplify reporting, and get more regular on a digitized platform, it just would make far more sense. And then you wouldn't be in this, how can I put it, this black hole of information about who's got how many heads and all the irrelevant information that goes around it.
No, you're right, Paul, and it should be simple, right? I mean, I agree with you, but you'll be surprised to note that people don't want to share that information, no matter how simple you make it. I mean, at the moment, we adopted the KBPO strategy in terms of the affidavit approach, and you'd still find that people would not be willing to share the information. And it baffles me as to why wouldn't they do that? Because by giving us that information, they're actually helping themselves, to be able to showcase that, listen, guys, we are doing a fantastic job. We are growing, we're bringing the jobs in, we're spending, we're investing. And Paul, you know better than anyone, this sector invests so much of money in business development in itself. I mean, if you don't even think of anything else, I mean, the amount of money that you guys spend on trying to attract those jobs to the country, that nobody supports you, nobody gives you incentives around that. So it's important for us to justify you know, the work that we're doing, the investment that we're bringing in, the jobs that we're bringing, the opportunities we're bringing in for young people. So reporting should be second nature, and people shouldn't be feeling apprehensive about it, shouldn't be feeling anxiety around it. They should just, you know, do the right thing and respond. So that's a plea that we are going to be making to the industry. And like I said, you know, it will be a steer call with all the relevant parties, all the aggregators who do track jobs, like I said, you know, KBPO included, and then, you know, so this process that I've spoken about when we started the session with the document that will be shared this afternoon with the industry, that, I mean, we basically have 2 days to be able to source that information from the 3 provinces, because before we sit in front of the minister on Friday afternoon, we've got to have an idea. I'm sure Paul, you yourself, you want to know, listen, what is the size of this industry? What is the head count? Because we all can share with you cumulative jobs, but the cumulative jobs and the difference with that reporting, it's not that BPESA hasn't been doing reporting or DTIC hasn't been doing reporting. They have been, but it's been cumulative jobs based on the incentive. So from the time they've started the incentive in 2007, how many jobs they've created year on year, and they're just building on that. But what they aren't doing is they aren't subtracting the jobs that have been lost, for example. And remember, even if those jobs were lost, they haven't been lost and gone to be sitting at home and unemployed. In most cases, they've moved on to different jobs. So, you know, it's about us being able to tell our story with great confidence, with very clear numbers, figures, etc. Because he's going to probably call out, you know, operators to say, you know, tell me a little bit about your growth, your business, etc. And yes, I know that operators can't share campaigns, but at least you could say, listen, my US campaigns are growing by a certain number, you know, give a story around UK, whatever the case is. But you're right. Ultimately, the answer to all of this is automation, but unfortunately, government just doesn't have the funds to be able to do it. And unless we have some whiz kids in our industry that have the ability to develop some kind of automated system, you know, for government and or for the industry, then that will be like hugely welcome, right? But yeah, I'd leave that. Hopefully somebody calls me after this and say, oh, we've got somebody who can develop that system. And I'm sure it's not something difficult to do, you know, but it is very much needed, Paul. I agree.
Yeah.
I think where Paul's comment is really valid is almost as if the frequency, the more we do it, it becomes second nature, and the data is closer, so it's more tangible to link to what we're receiving. But you know, to get a request for the last X number of years, you're so disconnected to data sometimes. So I think the frequency of it, at the end of the day, you're receiving funds, so it tells a story. I would be open to Paul's suggestion of frequent reporting and consistent reporting.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we have opened it up now for any other comments and inputs into the review process. Roland, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. So just some high-level stuff, and we can obviously drill it down further as we go along. But one of the key things is whilst we are aggressively developing our international markets, we also have to aggressively develop our local domestic entrepreneurs. Sorry. So you know, I'm suggesting that we look at a very specific intervention for incentives for local companies and entrepreneurs who want to get into the markets. And you can even look at, for example, incubators and accelerators. And you know, we can really look at examining how that can also help international companies to be competitive. At the end of the day, there must be a mutually beneficial engagement when we look at these type of incentive designs. Secondly, we should have a good target for incentivizing on physically challenged numbers. If we are saying that we want to increase our agent count by another 60,000, for example, let's say that we want to take 10% of that and actually have people that are physically challenged as an opportunity to enter the marketplace. So again, there we can look at an incubator type model for training, etc. And then the last thing I would like to put forward for consideration is an incentive for high levels of employee engagement scores, meaning that when you have employees that are engaged, you will have reduced attrition, reduced absenteeism, and that will make us more competitive in the market in terms of retraining and all the cost of actually replacement, etc. So incentives must not only just be to underwrite certain costs to make it competitive, it must also target some key pillars to make us competitive in other markets. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Roland. Great points. We will definitely capture those. Any other comments from the floor? Just general comments around the incentive, general concerns. I think we could also use the opportunity to speak about just generic stuff around the industry, the sector, where we may feel that we need additional government intervention, support, etc. And I know something that was usually high on the list of concerns was usually visas, etc. So anything else that you would like us to highlight and raise, you know, with the DTIC, which, I mean, obviously they are the custodians of our sector, of the master plan, of, you know, being able to support, etc. So here's your opportunity to raise anything else that you feel we need more of from government. Yes, Paul, please go ahead.
I just want to back up 2 points that were made earlier. I can't remember who brought it up, but someone brought it up about the importance of team leaders and the importance of our first line manager population. And ultimately, we need to develop our own in South Africa, but that comes with knowing what good looks like. So to know what good looks like means that we do need to also work on the visa point. And I think there's sometimes a belief in government that extra visas or making visas easier actually hurts jobs in South Africa. And it doesn't. It actually enables individuals to learn from what's going on in some of the global best practice locations. And then, but the other piece is about that fund or ability and support to develop in that leadership piece. Crucially important. I can't remember who brought it up, so I appreciate I'm repeating someone else there, but the two things go hand in hand.
Brilliant. And that's a great point that we have to position with government. So thanks for that, Paul. Eustace, I see your hand. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Rajni. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, perfectly.
I just want to pick up on the predictability of the grant, the comment that was made earlier. I think it's that we debate that certain initiatives should attract more, a bigger grant, you know, training of management to locations, etc. If I recall the last conversation, I think the government had allocated 1.4 billion over 3 years, and at the time we were 3/4 into the first year, and I think about 40% of the 1.4 billion had been paid, and another 30% had been claimed. So I think it was obvious that they were getting through that quite quickly. 500,000 jobs roughly is probably going to be something like 50 billion rand. So there is a big gap, and I think there is probably quite a lot of question marks and nervousness exactly where this is going to come from. And in the nicest way possible, if we could perhaps just relay that in our report back.
Yeah, no, great point, and we'll definitely do so. Eustace, I think that's important. So that will definitely be included. Any other comments or hands? Nothing further. Mark, I'm just going to hand back. There are questions in the chat, I have been told. Why can't I access my chat? Trace, do you want to just, oh no, I've managed to access it. Oh, I was speaking about the transcripts from the previous call. We do not have it because that was hosted by the DTIC, and so they haven't shared it. And the other thing is, I don't know whether they've shared with the industry the presentation that they did, but I requested it and I didn't receive that either. Did anybody receive the presentation from the DTIC?
No.
Oh, you did? Oh,
No,
you
no,
didn't?
No, we didn't.
Okay, so which means we're gonna have to get back to them to ask them to please share the presentation and then transcripts of that meeting. So no, we didn't have that. And then SMMEs in the GBS sector from previously disadvantaged can assist with being a bridge for both work readiness and triple BE compliance. Yes, Eugene, you're right. And we have to try and support that a bit more. Online portal for uploading claim and approval processes. We did speak about automation, which is what we're suggesting to the DTIC. Mark has the same comment. And then understanding how the fully loaded costs across BPO industry has changed, being impacted since approval to date due to economic issues. So this is going to be done by the DTIC as part of their benchmarking, as part of the incentive review. So when they do their stakeholder engagement, they usually will share the findings around this Pooja. So that will definitely be done. Middle management is critical to ensure sustainability and results in agents delivery. Further supports the effective insourcing. Yes, I think that has been captured as well. I mean, middle management, leadership, also specialist skills, workforce managers, etc. So we've got that. Okay, and then I've been told here, just remember that not all BPOs report to KBPO. So yes, so for those people on the call that may not report to KBPO, and you feel that your numbers haven't been accounted for, please do submit that report to us. But I don't want to overly complicate things and just try to keep them based. I mean, Sean, somebody like merchants that has operations in the Western Cape as well as Gauteng, please just make sure that when you're reporting for Gauteng, you're only reporting on your head count in Gauteng, because we don't want to be caught out because we've double counted. And we also don't want to exclude anyone that have felt that they haven't signed an affidavit and they haven't been part of it. So please do try and contact myself or Tracy so that we can give you access to the template and that you can report. And then this speaks about digital system to be able to access the job count numbers, and they weren't really successful. Okay, and then yeah, I see your message, Mark, with regards to the tier 2. Well, obviously, there will be sufficient notice that will be given to the industry in terms of whatever is being proposed by the DTIC. And like I said, that we will be given another opportunity to comment in terms of what they are proposing. But furthermore, you also, I mean, I have a seat at that table, and I'd also be able to represent industry, especially being part of both sessions on the 19th, as well as today. You know, I've captured a lot of what's being raised and concerns, etc. So I think there will be a lot of representation. My only fear is that I hope we have, you know, raised everything that's of importance and concern to the industry. I see Lorato's asked for and my email address. So Trace, please can you send Lorato my email address? And Roland, I see your hand, so please can you go ahead?
Sure. One last question, Rashni. In terms of the process now from here, is this the new cycle of the next 5 years that's been considered?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So the last one was launched in it was launched in December 2018, and it was effective from January 2019. So it's finished sort of a full 5-year cycle, and now you know, they're reviewing and presenting the new suite of incentives which they'll introduce. They did tell us it will take them about 4 months, but I can already let you know that there's been like a delay by a month. So we could actually maybe just, I think, to be on the safe side and knowing the bureaucracy and all of the challenges at the DTIC, we must give them about 6 months to get this work done and presented to industry.
And in
Roland,
the interim, for the gap of 6 months, then, if this project secured by any of the operators, can they still apply for the grant, or they've got to wait for it to be approved?
Yes. So the incentive is still available. Not retrospective, only if it's a pilot project, Roland. Only if it's a pilot, but it is currently available. What they did was they put in a interim measure where they've added an extra year to the existing incentive, value of 26,000. So for non-complex jobs, you're getting 26,000 Rand over 5 years, basically, which adds up to about 130,000 Rand per job. So that's what they've done as an interim measure while they actually reviewing the incentive guidelines.
Okay, thank you.
So I must say that you know, the minister did speak about the fact that they want to incentivize in a way where they are able to you know, get more value out of industry in terms of aligning with you know, economic imperatives. I mean, especially, I know that there were lots of concerns around inclusive hiring, etc. Sean, Sid, but you know, they want to encourage new entrants into the sector, etc. So there will definitely be certain conditions that's put in there that, you know, makes them actually make a bigger contribution to economic impact. But again, I mean, it's just us speculating, so we have to wait and see. And the best we could do is actually, you know, submit these proposals to them so that they can consider it during the review process. So if there aren't any further hands or questions, I think we will end the session. But just to call out, guys, I mean, I really hope that you all will avail yourselves. Sid, I know you're busy. Eustace, Paul, please avail yourselves, Sean, for the meeting with the minister on Friday at 2. It's important that as many of us participate in that session as possible. Like I said, he wants to hear directly from the operators. He's giving us the platform. So let's avail ourselves and be part of that engagement. And like I said, I'll send through a Teams invite later today to everyone. And then also, please, can you respond to that request for headcount as well? And if there's anyone that you know in the industry that you chat to regularly that wasn't part of this call, please do share the session with the minister on Friday, as well as the need for them to share their headcount with us. Those are the only 2 appeals, but thank you so much, everyone, for sharing your afternoon with us, and I hope you have a lovely afternoon further. Thanks a lot. Goodbye.